This is the Physical Activity Researcher Podcast, a podcast for researchers of sedentary behavior, physical activity, and sports. Join for a relaxed dialogue about research design, practicalities, and, well, anything related to research. Learn from your fellow researchers useful and relevant information that does not fit into formal content and limited space of scientific publications. And here is your host, researcher and entrepreneur, Olli Tikkanen.
Before we start today's episode, we would like to ask for your help. Dr. Scott McNamara at the University of Northern Iowa is conducting a study to examine what motivates podcast creators and podcast listeners within the field of physical education. They also seek to understand how a community of learners is cultivated using this medium. They are looking for participants, and since you are listening to our podcast today, you are a potential participant. To participate in the study, you need to be creating physical education podcast or be a listener. This study involves completing an online survey, which will take about 5 minutes. After completion of the survey, you will be asked to provide your email so that they can ask you to participate in a 45 minutes long interview. So if you're interested, please use the link in the episode description to complete the survey. This would help in developing new knowledge and the value and benefits of podcasts for individuals and communities. Thanks for your time. Welcome everyone. I'm very excited about the forthcoming episode as we are talking about physical education, and I get to discuss with the fellow Science Comms podcaster, as our guest is the host of podcast called Playing with Research in Health and PE. Our guest has done his bachelor and master's in California State University in kinesiology with emphasis on sports psychology, and has done his Doctor of Education at Columbia University. Currently, he is working as an assistant professor at the George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, US. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce our guest, Dr. Risto Marttinen. Welcome, Risto.
Thanks, Olli.
And if we move to fitness testing of students, how do you see the current state and issues with fitness testing in PE?
Well, I think if we talk about fitness testing in PE in the U.S., we have some serious issue. We talk about fitness testing in other countries. They're like, you do high stakes fitness testing in PE in the U.S.? Why? And they're so confused why we put so much pressure on it. And I think, what do we do with it? I think honestly, what California did was really good. They basically this year, Gavin Newsom said, we're going to put a hold on it until 2022, until we can figure out how to fix this. And I think that's a smart move. It's a pump the brakes. Let's figure it out. It's not, we're going to trash it all together. And, some of the issues, right, that we have with fitness testing in the way that it's done. And so for those of you that, haven't gone through this or are in different countries, in the US in fitness testing, let's say you live in California, in grades 5, 7, and 9, you have to take the fitness test, the fitness gram battery. So your shuttle run, beep test, pacer test, push-ups, sit-ups, sit and reach, and all these different tests. And you have to go through this full battery twice a year, once in the beginning, once in the spring. And they upload all this information onto the state website through FitnessGram. And this information, not individualized, but school level wise, is public. So you can go in and look at different schools or different, different areas or, districts and look at the fitness test that school did. And a lot of times this is then said to be the value of your PE program. Oh, we increased our pacer test by 15% this year. Good job, PE teacher. Whereas you're still looking at 2 days a week at 40 minutes that they're coming into PE. So what control does that PE teacher actually have on this? So for some students, it is an amazingly degrading experience. Putting kids on display, you turn them away from lifetime physical activity. You have, and one of the issues that California also brought up is that you have non-gender conforming youth not fitting in. There are different levels for girls to, quote, pass or boys to pass. But then if you don't conform to either gender, then how do you grade that student? You have research on attitudes of teachers toward fitness testing. So, if you have a negative attitude towards fitness testing, your students will have a more negative attitude towards fitness testing because you don't value it. And, there's a lot of research. Michael Gard has done critical papers on this. We've had different colleagues at Towson University, Hofstra University, Delphi talk about, the ethics of this. So there is a neoliberal tilt to FitnessGram. So that company sells the software. So you can't just run a pacer test and then say that you're going to use a pacer test and use that score and just put it on a piece of paper and give it to the student. It has to go into the software. Well, the software costs money. So now if every single school in California that has 40 to 50 million people in that state, now all of those people that go to school in 5th, 7th, and 9th grades, which is all elementary schools, all middle schools, and all high schools, because that's where 5, 7, and 9 drop in, all of those people have to buy that software. So now you're putting that score in, you're buying that, computer software, you have to purchase that computer software, and then now you're reporting it. So, you look at even doing a pull-up. If you can't do a pull-up in 6th grade, arguably, should you be able to? Sure. But there are students that just can't. So why are we going to throw them in front of 30 students watching and saying, hey, Ole, go up there, do a pull-up. And you're like, I can't do a pull-up. Well, you have to go up there and try. That's so embarrassing. And that's how my 6th grade was. That was my first year in the U.S. And I vividly remember going up and the teacher saying, you have to go up there and show me a pull-up. And all I did was I played soccer 24/7. So I don't have any upper body strength because that's not what I was training at that point. I was good at running, but I was embarrassed as the new kid in school. I don't know. Those are things that I should not remember out of my PE class in 6th grade. That instance was maybe 2 minutes long, but I'm 38 years old and I remember what happened to me in 6th grade PE. So there has to be something wrong there. There has to be something that we could do in some better way.
Yeah, I agree with you. So do you see any role for fitness testing? Is there a way to do it correctly, or should we just leave it out?
I think we can do it correctly. I don't think it needs to be as high stakes. So Sharon Phillips, Kevin Mercy, and I wrote this practitioner piece in Strategies a couple years ago. And, we list out 4 things that we should have. And so one is it should be a part of a year-long curriculum. So it shouldn't be just test in the fall and test in the spring. It should be about, hey, this is how you get stronger. You can't do a push-up? Well, let's just stay in a plank and touch your shoulders and start building up that strength and start giving them things that they can do outside of their house, that they can be physically active on the weekends and still build those strength and conditioning aspects. Number 2 is using criterion reference, not norm reference tests. So FitnessGram is a criterion reference. So basically, crash course in the idea that, all of your students in that class can get to a passing score. Whereas the President's Fitness Challenge that I went through when I was a kid was only the top 10% in that class are able to get a passing score or a top presidential medal score. Number 3 is, helping students understand the meaning of fitness testing, right? And number 4 is you have to make it fun. And that's where I go back to this. Fun is that vehicle for learning. And we feel that if you do those 4 things, you can actually make this meaningful and you can make it work. And it doesn't have to be a high stakes thing. And there are different ways to, develop that, cardiorespiratory endurance or muscular strength and endurance. But also it needs to be meaningful for that student. They have to understand why they're doing it, and they have to understand how to improve it, and they have to understand why they're even doing it. And, there's a lot of people, and we talk about this in our classes, and a lot of our students, when I give them these critical views, they go, well, we should get rid of fitness testing. And we informally fitness test ourselves all the time. I'm sure that when you go on a trail run, you don't have to, look at your time some days to know that you weren't at your best, because you've practiced trail running for so long, where you feel like something's off. Other times, you'll try to do a personal best and see if you can run that 5K, 10K, whatever that hike is. You'll look at your time and go, oh, that was really good. That was the best I've ever done. That's a sort of fitness testing. But if we can explain fitness testing in that way, or, kids that are really into soccer and they practice juggling, I remember doing this when I was a kid. I would try to get to a better number of keeping up the soccer ball before it hits the ground in any possible way. And I was so excited when I hit 51 instead of 49. And I kept on trying and trying and trying. So I was motivated. That's not a fitness test. That's a skill test. But that came from internal motivation. That was not a teacher or a parent or an adult watching me and saying, you have to get to 51 today. So we always have those individual tests. And I think a lot of people who are listening, you could think to yourself of what are the things that you test yourself with. We do that all the time. It's just teaching that skill. We don't need to broadcast it to the rest of the world. I think it's important to see trends, right? So are we, are we having students who are doing less and less and less push-ups? Well, okay, if we are, that's a serious issue, because when you get down to it, you have to have things that increase your bone density up until your late teenage years, or you're going to have more brittle bones in the future. So there has to be some sort of balance there, and they can be done through games and activities and just playing instead of, okay, line up. When you hear the music start, that means you have to go. And every time you hit a beep, it's going to get progressively faster and faster and faster. That might not be the most enjoyable thing.
Yeah, I think really good points. And did I understood right that you have a podcast episode made of these 4 suggestions that you mentioned?
So I don't have a podcast episode of those. We have a paper, and you can find that paper through the ResearchGate to read for free. But I did have Tara Blackshear. She's at Towson University, and she did a research paper on using the fitness test or fitnessgram in teacher education programs. And she cites a lot of good work there. So that podcast is out in, I think, early November 2020. So you can listen to that as well. And she cites some of the good work in there as well. And I know some of my colleagues are doing, very recent work that is just, not out yet, but it's on the way. That is it's going to be really interesting.
All right. Yeah, that's good. I think many of the listeners are probably interested about the fitness testing and how could it be done correctly in PE. And if we then move to doing research with the school age people and maybe the difficulty in collecting data in there.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up was it's one of my struggles as a researcher. And, I listen to and I read papers from people who've done really great projects in schools, and I have not had the same experience. I've had really great qualitative data. I've had really great, meaningful, programs that we've run in our after school program. We stayed a full year in each school, and we've had really great results in qualitative data. But my ability to collect data over a long period in free living environments, I can get the data when they're there. I can give them a pedometer, accelerometer, and then say, before you leave, check that back in with me. But my whole goal has been to figure out, what are the students doing? Am I actually having an effect in their out of school time? Am I having an effect during their recess time? And there hasn't been a ton of work in following students for like a month and having them have their accelerometer on for a month to see, are they physically active in and out of school and during weekends, during times when we assume that because they have all this free time that they're being physically active. And my dissertation was trying to track students for, I think we did 5 weeks, and I lost so many accelerometers because I'm working with students in affluent schools, and I'm working with students in low income schools in 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. And I would ask the students, I'm like, hey, where's your accelerometer today? Oh, I think I left it on my counter. I'm like, when did you leave it on your counter? They're like, Monday. I'm like, it's Friday. They're like, yeah, I just forgot. And I had the same thing come through in the Reach after school program. I probably lost 20% of the accelerometers, and we've had the same in the PEP grants that we've done, which are used to be these federally funded physical education grants, where you would sit down and give every student in a PE class an accelerometer or pedometer to wear, and you sign them out and which number they have, and then the students get up to do their physical activity and you see 10 accelerometers on the ground where the students should have them on. And so I think that we have so much, let me speak for myself, because maybe people are doing this totally differently, but I have so much loss of equipment. I have so much missing data. And when you look at it, my activities that we do in the after school program, we had a student-centered curriculum. We had the students negotiate what they want to do. We had, students chime in on how they want to be physically active. We had them do reflections, all this stuff. But then I get caught up in the same thing of still doing a top-down fitness test, because what other quantitative data can I get to show that I am being successful in the after-school program? So I'm happy to speak more about that, but I just feel like it's been a struggle, and I don't know how we can get all students represented in these ways and really figure out, are they physically active? Because we can say that they can be physically active during PE time because that's prescribed. But can we follow students in and out of school to see if they're physically active? Because you can get that information. We got that information in interviews. We would ask students who, in our after school program, they were not very engaged and not physically active. And when we sat down with them at the end of the year and throughout, asking them through journals throughout the year, they would say, oh, I don't like being physically active in front of my friends or in front of boys. Well, what do you do? Like, well, as soon as I get out of here, I go play with my cousins at the park and we play soccer. I'm just sitting there going, we run a soccer program, but you're not physically active here. They're like, no, because I don't feel comfortable, because people judge me. But then they're physically active out of school. But that information is really relevant. I can write that up in a qualitative article and talk about how students are physically active outside of school, but there's no second point of data. It's just a one-on-one interview, which I trust because I've hung out with this sixth grader for an entire school year. So I doubt that she would lie to me at this point, but it's very hard for me to get that data because they forget to wear their accelerometers. They just, in order to have really accurate data, it's got to be an actigraph. So it's on their waist. It's uncomfortable. You don't want to wear that on your waist. And then the argument would be, well, they have a wrist-worn accelerometer now from actigraph. Well, yeah, but what am I going to do with the $300 actigraph accelerometers that I have? Are we just going to throw them away? Then we have to get new stuff. So I think that there's a lot of issues, and I would argue that we don't actually know how active students are, especially at the upper elementary school and middle school level.
Yeah, I can see your pain, difficulty, and expensive devices getting lost and missing data.
For most sedentary behavior and physical activity researchers, collecting the research data is one of the most frustrating steps of a project, especially as inefficient data collection steals too much of your precious time, causes unnecessary stress and hassle, and can easily derail progress of your project. This is why we devised a revolutionary new way to collect data. Introducing Fibion Sense Motion, the beginning of a new era. Fibion Sense Motion is a cutting-edge, next-generation system that allows you to easily and remotely collect, store, and manage data. Our solution features a tiny, waterproof device that captures the sedentary behavior and physical activity data, a mobile app for automatic uploading of the data from the device, and a cloud service for managing the data. Even better, all collected data is GDPR compliant, and you have access to automatically analyzed variables of activity types and raw 3-axis accelerometer data. Don't compromise on the quality of your research or the project timeframes. Discover the convenience and power behind our solution at sense.fibion.com. That is SENS.fibion.com. Fibion, created by researchers for researchers.
Do you see what would be the ideal device that you think with you could collect good data set? What are the problems with you mentioned that waist worn, it's difficult, but how should the device be that it would work?
So I know that there are people doing this. I've researched this a little bit, and I'll give this out because I've given up on the idea of writing a grant and doing this myself. But if you want to track students at the upper elementary, middle school level, you do it through accelerometers and shoes, especially in America where kids wear shoes inside and outside normally. It wouldn't work in Finland because the kids would take off their shoes when they walk into your house. But if you want to measure how students are physically active, insert the thing in their shoes. But then that grant would be buying shoes for 50, 100, 200, however many students you're going to have in your study. But if you figure out how to develop that, and there are a couple startup companies that do this, that they either have it on the very bottom of the shoe or they have it that you lace it up into your laces. I think those are the ways that you can do it because they won't even think about it. And if you go into a low-income community and give, kids whose parents may not have them funds to buy them brand new Nikes. Imagine if you give a kid a pair of Nikes and say, hey, here's a pair of Nikes. I want you to, wear these so we can figure out how physically active you are. And then you get to keep them afterwards. Kids would probably wear that for a week everywhere they go. Maybe for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. And yeah, you'd have some trail off, but if you get the right size shoe on a kid who doesn't have cool shoes and all of a sudden you give them to them, I think that would be the ideal way to do it.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, and it makes sense. Wearing something on your waist is always challenging. Something, usually quite big devices on the wrist, it's also, and you don't get that good data. But yeah, in the shoe you would get a good data, which is a good indication of physical activity. Although you should probably need to charge those shoes on a weekly or I don't know how often, but anyway, sometimes need to charge to get for example full month of data. So if anyone is listening, there's a good idea, and basically it could be done on, you just need the acceleration data. So any accelerometer could work if it just fits in the shoe.
Yeah, and we had the one that I used for the Reach project was a band that had I think it was like a 3-month battery. So, unfortunately the company's out of business, but like there are companies that have longer and longer, if it doesn't have a display, if it doesn't have like all of this stuff, it doesn't do much more than just gather data and sync automatically. I think that there are bands that can do that without having to charge as much. But that is one of the issues too, is once you take that off your wrist or off your waist or however, then you add that complication of, are they ever going to put it on once it's charged? And I think, have you heard of Whoop? The Whoop band, WHOOP?
I think I have heard. I don't remember how it is.
Yeah. So they have an external battery. So you charge the battery, you never take off your band, and you just clip the battery onto your band for like 20, 30 minutes. And then it just kind of charges on your body. And then you just take the battery off. So they never, you end up never taking the band off, which is great for Whoop, because I'm sure they're collecting some sort of extra information on me, but I love it. Like once you get comfortable with wearing it consistently, I don't know if that would work for, middle schoolers or elementary school students, but I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of researchers that are doing research on physical activity and exercise science and all these different things, and even PE researchers, they're doing research on pre-service teachers. They're doing it on college students, because I can just go up to a college student and get their, permission slip. I can just have them sign it right there. They don't need to go take it to their parent. I don't need to go through an ethics board that says, click here if you're working with minors. So I think that's what we showed a lot of we did a 21-year review of research on teaching and PE, and we reviewed over 1,000 articles over this 21-year span. And the trend is towards questionnaire data and using adults, pre-service teachers, in-service teachers, instead of students, instead of qualitative, long format interviews and continued engagement of staying in that community for a year to learn what it's really like in physical education. Because it's harder to get through ethics, it's a lot more work, and getting a parent permission slip in a community that doesn't have a lot of parent involvement is really hard. So it's harder to go into communities that have less parent involvement. And that's why we know less about what goes on in low-income communities versus communities adjacent to research-intensive universities in the U.S. Because that's where money's coming in. That's where researchers are. And they're not going to go into inner cities to go in and collect data on schools that it's going to be much harder in, they're going to go to places that it's easier. And I think that government grants and universities are changing this for sure. They're saying, if you apply for this grant, it has to be in a, low income, or I don't remember what they call opportunity zones. So they have to be these places that have up and coming businesses or a gentrifying neighborhood or something like that, to force researchers to go in and do the research where it needs to be done.
Yeah. And it is often that when you try to collect data in real world environments, even really small obstacles actually are big obstacles. Like it needs to be really smooth. Even just simple thing of charging maybe once a week might be too much. So I think it really needs to be thought through and try to develop it really far and try to get all the small things away from collecting good data in real life environments.
Yeah, and once you start, that ball is rolling. It's rolling downhill and it's going fast and you can't stop it. Like, you take a baseline data for accelerometers and then you go in and that baseline data didn't, monitor correctly because students didn't wear it over the weekend, or they threw your accelerometer in the laundry and now it doesn't work anymore. Like those are things that then, okay, now you started with 60 students. Now you have only 40 students, and then you have time one period and 10 of those students, didn't wear it. Now you're down to 30, and then you have to do a post test or a second time. So you can quickly see how even a really well-designed study, ends up with half of the participants. And then you say, well, you go to peer review and they say, well, you didn't have a lot of people in the study. Like, well, yeah, we started with a lot, but you only have so much control. I can't force kids to wear it. When they say, do I have to wear this? What's your response as an ethical researcher? No, you don't have to do anything. I'm asking you to. This will help because it's going to help other people understand how physically active kids are in your neighborhood. And the kid looks at you and says, but I don't have to wear this. That's what I heard, right? I'm like, no. And they just take off the accelerometer. And I've had that happen to me. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much for participating. If you want to do the interview later on. So I got tons of data on why kids don't want to wear accelerometers or what they didn't like about it. But that's not very interesting data.
Thanks for joining us this week on Physical Activity Researcher Podcast. If you like the show, make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing or following the show on Twitter. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. If you found value in the show, we would really appreciate a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever app you're using. Or if you would, in a real old school way, simply tell a friend about the show. It would be a great help for us. We have a fantastic lineup of guests for forthcoming episodes, so be sure to tune in. Thank you all for your support and have a great day.